Providing care to someone we love may be one of our best acts of love, but it also comes with many stressors and challenges that can affect our well-being. Learn about taking care while caretaking next on Speak Your Mind. Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center. More and more of us are taking on the challenge of caring for a spouse or an elderly parent or relative, a selfless act that can pay great dividends for both you and the one you're caring for. But at the same time, figuring out how to manage that care while handling your own life can be quite a challenge. I have three guests who have great ideas about how to take care while providing care. So start calling in your questions right now. Locally, dial 218-788-2844 or call toll-free at 1-877-307-8762. And you can also email them using the address listed at the bottom of your screen. Now let's meet our guests. Dr. Doug Heck is a licensed psychologist with the Duluth Psychological Clinic who specializes in treating those who've had a life-changing health crisis. Christine Dwyer is a caregiver consultant through the Family Memory Care Program in Duluth and Carleton County. And Char Davern is here to share her journey as a caregiver for her husband. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. And Doug, I think a really good place for us to start, as I've been thinking about this, I thought, you know, I don't know that I've had a lot of conversations with the people who I could potentially be caring for in my life, and it dawns on me that, you know, and my job is talking about hard topics. I'm good at doing that. But what is with us that we just don't even talk about this topic, that it seems to be one of the taboo topics, that whole care providing and that notion?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we look at people who've had some kind of illness or disability, we're all very able to talk about the medical team and the healthcare team, but the silent part of that team is often the caregiver. And some of that is because we're so focused on the person with the symptoms that we want to make sure that she or he are doing as well as possible. And we don't always think about who else might be having some difficulties or stress or other kind of problems because of that person's symptoms. And sometimes caregivers are quite quiet themselves, and they may have that attitude of I'll take care of this, I'll figure it out some way. And they're not always as open as we'd like them to be in talking about their experience. But I think the healthcare team needs to be better at asking the wives, the husbands, the daughters, the family members, how are you guys doing with this?
And what have you found in your work with people, Christine, in terms of when you meet families and meet with caregivers? Often are these people who have had prior conversations, the conversations that occurred prior to being in a caregiver role of what do we want to do if this happens?
I think a lot of times families just aren't ready to pre-plan, and so I try to help work with them and help them. I think the one thing that I do a lot of is help them with self-care and help them do some planning, future planning, help them become educated, and to work together as a team. I work a lot with family meetings and help people communicate so they can do the best they can for that caregiver.
And usually, though, those are the conversations that are coming once they're already in a caregiving role,
crisis,
right?
Right.
Not those before conversations.
Right.
Now, Char, you are a caregiver, and so you're the person here, you're the real expert sitting here, I think, because you're in the trenches with this. Was this a topic that you and your husband had a conversation with before you were placed in the role of kind of being more of a caregiver to your husband?
No, we had never talked about that. That was the furthest thing from my mind. I just figured that once we retired, we'd be able to go out and enjoy life.
And tell us a little bit about your situation.
Well, what happened is back in 2010, my husband was having problems remembering things, so finally his boss recommended that he go see a psychologist and have an evaluation done, which he did. And then that's when the doctor gave us the news that he felt Tim was at the mild cognitive impairment stage. And that was hard for me to take at first.
I bet that was. I bet that was.
Yes.
How did you adjust to that news?
Well, the first couple of years went fine. I didn't notice that much of a change, and we tried to do as much traveling as we could. And then in the last year, the memory is going more. It's getting more into the mild dementia stage. And I find that I have to be there more for him, and I'm afraid to leave him at home alone. So that's when, in turn, I got in touch with the Alzheimer's Association. And they, in turn, gave me Christine's name. And I contacted her a couple months ago. And she's been a great help with getting me to the right support group meetings and meetup groups and support group where I've met another person that her husband has gone through it longer than mine. And I feel I can call her, and she calls me, and we text each other sometimes.
A person who knows exactly what you're going through.
Yes, and she's been a great help also. But I find I can have other people that understand what I'm going through.
Now, Doug, talk a little bit about whether you see differences in caregiver reactions when it's a situation. So there's the situation that Shar found herself in, which is husband is having some problems but pretty much intact, and so it's more of a slower progression as compared to maybe a real sudden change that might happen with either like a major stroke or a major car accident, say.
I think in the latter situation, the distress in both the person who's had the accident as well as the caregiver is really quite prominent, because it's an immediate crisis. Everyone knows that all the rules are different now, and all the things that we have been planning are going to have to be put off for a while. So in some ways, it's a more obvious situation for everyone, and oftentimes people are more willing to ask for help. In a situation sometimes like what Shar is talking about is that with a very slow, gradually developing kind of condition, most caregivers who I've talked to have been willing to take on the extra difficulties as they arise and just try to deal with it as best they can. And pretty soon, before they know it, it's an overwhelming task. And I think that the thing that I'd like to just comment on is that by far and away the reason I think that we're here tonight talking about that is not because caregivers as a group are failing or don't have the skills. It's because life has dealt them a situation that is truly, truly daunting and overwhelming. And it's not one that many human beings can handle by themselves.
And that often, in fact, when you say it's not that they don't have the skills, but sometimes in terms of what a person might need from a caregiver also could be beyond, you know,
Absolutely.
I'm not a skilled nurse.
Absolutely.
And so,
right.
And yet I could see myself wanting to be a skilled nurse, and wanting that of myself, and now I feel bad because I can't do those things. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you see for caregivers.
Well, like you mentioned, you maybe have to be a nurse, a pharmacist, you're a chauffeur, you're a planner. There's so many roles that you have to play as you're trying to care for your loved one. Some of the other challenges I see are people needing breaks or respite. And that's so very important because this is a marathon. It isn't a sprint. And all along the way, you have to get some help. And I think, too, there's no manual for how to do this. And so caregivers have to know they have to reach out to those around them. And that's something that I really work on with my people, is helping them utilize their support networks and reach out for help and resources that are available.
So the first step in that seems to be knowing that you need help, and then the second step, actually asking for the help, right? Which and you're nodding your head. You're nodding your head, Shar.
That was my big thing that Christine had to get me to do, was to ask for help. I was having family and friends saying, "Can we help?" And I was insistent on doing it myself because my husband wanted only me to take care of her. He didn't want somebody else coming in, or and everybody else is still working, and it's hard to get them to help you during the day or night. And we have a daughter that works the night shift, so she tries to sleep during the day. So, you know, I was feeling guilty in that respect, that I wasn't asking enough. And Christine has gotten me to understand that I've got to learn to ask for help and not.
How hard was that for you? Because one of the things that you said was that your husband really wanted it to be you, that he didn't want there to be somebody else there, and
Right.
and even if it was another family member, that he wanted Shar there. And so how hard was that for you to actually set what you knew your husband wanted aside and go ahead and follow what Christine was asking you to do?
That was very overwhelming, and I was having quite a bit of trouble doing that, but I finally realized that I have to do this, or I was getting more angry too, because I felt like sometimes when I would ask, I get the feeling from them that, well, I suppose I can come and help, but you know, I've got things going on also. And I understand that, but it just made me feel guilty, because I just figured, well, where can I turn to? Well, then Christine also had told me, and so had some of my family members, that there is places like Home Instead and things like that where people can come in and help you. But I was having difficulty even asking for that. But then when I went to the Alzheimer's walk that they had at the end of September, somebody had suggested, or no, there was a silent auction. So I ended up getting the lowest bid. And I had somebody from Home Instead come in, and my husband kept asking, who is this person? You know, because he was feeling uncomfortable that there was somebody in his house that he didn't know. And he would just keep pacing around, and she would finally tell him that it's okay, I'm done working, because she came to help me do laundry and get some downtime.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because I want to hear what Doug has to say about something that you mentioned, Shar, which is these feelings of anger and guilt. And we have a caller here who's right on the same path. A woman said that her parents were married for 50 years when her father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and her mother became mean, angry, and depressed. Please shed light on why someone would experience those kind of mood changes, because I think when we think about caregiving, it is the angel coming in, and Shar, you were saying that you sometimes felt that anger and guilt and the sadness. Talk a little bit about that.
I think it can come about in various ways. I was just talking with somebody the other day who was feeling ashamed that she was feeling angry at her husband because he wasn't understanding what was going on around him anymore. And so she was feeling bad for feeling that way herself, and she was trying to understand, why in the world would I be angry? And in many cases, people can develop anger because of the actual loss that they've experienced, and they're not so much angry at their husband or angry at their loved one. They're mostly angry that they're in this situation, that the losses have happened. Why did this need to happen to us? And so the anger sometimes gets misplaced. Another scenario for someone developing anger who might be in a caregiver role that I've seen is that they assume sometimes that others should know how much difficulty they're having. And so, like Chris has done here, it's really helpful to teach and instruct and encourage caregivers to be able to let people know if they're struggling. So many of us try to take on so much and be so self-reliant. And that's a virtue in many ways, but in this case, it really kind of works against people sometimes. It truly isn't, I don't think, is possible for someone to know what you're going through unless you're really there. You can have family members who come in on a weekend and say, hey, I'll help you out here, what can I do? And then they leave again Sunday night and go home. But you're the one there that's 24/7.
Right.
And sometimes people in your situation can become angry that others can go home and leave this, and I have this every day without as much help as I need. So there's a variety of scenarios. Anger is a very natural human emotion, and it's certainly not something to be ashamed about. It's more something to talk about.
And there were probably times when you got angry with your loved one when you weren't in a caregiving
Very good
capacity,
point.
right? I mean, that doesn't all of a sudden stop just
Right.
because now you're in a caregiving capacity.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit.
I do have a very quick comment, though, is that sometimes it's helpful, I think, for people to understand if their loved one is not understanding because he or she is purposely just not paying attention, or if it's part of their disease or their disability. And I think sometimes we try to help people see that your spouse is not understanding this because he's just not capable anymore. And sometimes that alleviates people of some of their anger. But if the caregiver is sitting there and saying, he can listen to me if he wants to, but he's just choosing not to, then that causes more anger. And so sometimes we help sort that out for people.
Christine, tell us a little bit about how you help families negotiate when there are sort of multiple siblings and who have a parent who maybe needs to have some care provided, and just negotiating all of those sibling relationships, and some may not, they may not all live in this area.
Right, right. Well, like I said before, I try to facilitate family meetings and bring as many family members, siblings and such into the fold. And it's been an amazing experience because the caregiver, they can really see what the caregiver has been experiencing and how difficult it's been, and it gives that caregiver a chance to open up about what their needs are. I think you've noticed that too when we've met.
Yes.
That it's been quite helpful. And communication is the key. For the caregiver to let the family know what their needs are. And each family member I've found has gifts that they can offer. Some are very versed in medical things, some can be helpful in the financial areas, in the planning, some can give respite care and help at home. And so I think it's identifying what each person can bring to the table and help with that family.
Often, you know, in my own experiences, I've listened to siblings talk about I'm the one who is doing the bulk of the work, and you know, two siblings do the bulk of the work, and then the other two over here they're not pulling their weight. And how do you help families negotiate those kind of disagreements?
Well, I think when we've had family meetings, we're very clear and open about again, everybody bringing something to the table. And often they do discover what their strengths are and their abilities to give to that situation. There are large families and many have difficulty deciding who can help, but I think it's that communication and willingness of the caregiver to open up and ask for the help.
When you started asking for help at first, you said that was a little difficult and challenging just for you. Has it been worth it?
Oh, definitely, yes. Now I'm feeling more free at doing it. I'm communicating better with especially our daughter to let her know, because I don't think she fully understood, or I wasn't giving her the chance to really understand what I was going through. So I feel that has helped tremendously because her and I are communicating much better now.
I think Shar is a great example of a caregiver that has just shown so much resilience and so much strength, and she's really realized her limitations and that she can't do it all alone. And she has shown just such great steps that she's taken to help herself, to take good care of herself, to ask for help, and a lot of benefits have come from that.
Yes.
She's very involved. She's used a lot of resources now to help her at home.
I've even gotten involved where I've got it set up where my husband goes 3 days a week to Benedictine, which gives me chance to do things and get together with friends. And I've been going to movies because some of the movies he doesn't care to watch, but I want to see them. So that has worked out tremendously.
She's really gotten a lot of balance back in her life, and that's been so nice to see.
And talk a little bit about that notion, Doug, of balance, because I know often people take on caregiving. They have rich, full lives before the caregiving opportunity presents itself. And, you know, when I was doing some reading in preparation for tonight's show, each little website I went to said, create balance in your life, and I just shrugged my shoulders and said, well, you know, I seem to have my hands full right now, and I'm not in a caregiving capacity with that. I can't imagine what that's like for caregivers of figuring that out.
Sure. Well, I think it starts with the definition of balance, because sometimes people believe balance means 50-50. And I think it's not always that. I think that in a caregiving role, by definition, most of the time, or a lot of time and energy and resources are going to be spent being responsible for the one who you're caring for. But what we try to shoot for is, rather than it being 100% of your life and time, can we back that off to even maybe 60% or 70%, so that 30 or 40% of your time can be spent attending to your own needs and meeting your own, doing things that are meaningful for you as a person. So it may not always be possible to get back to 50-50 balance, but it's possible to get back to be doing more for yourself.
What are the stressors that some of caregivers face, that some of these external stressors that make their job even more challenging than just what on the surface it would seem to be?
Well, maybe even Char could speak to some of that, some of the stressors that you've had also.
Well, most of my stresses was, you know, the idea that my husband gets confused with getting himself dressed. Sometimes he'll start to put clothing on the wrong way, and I just find myself that I just have to learn to take a deep breath and get him to understand that, you know, he's, you know, it's okay, you know, and it just gets very stressful for me in that way, to realize that this is what can happen with the brain, that, you know, and some of the other things is that it's affecting his eyesight even.
So, you know, one of the things that you're describing is just watching your husband decline, this man who you love.
Yes,
decline.
And I used to depend on him so much, because he was a fantastic handyman, and I miss that. So now I'm finding that I have to find somebody that I can trust to do the handiwork around the house, where I used to be able to just say, you know, I need this done, and we live in an old house, and it's a 2-story, and he's having trouble going up and down the stairs now, and I worry about him falling, so I'm on a list to get into an independent living place. And I'm hoping that that'll work out. In the meanwhile, I'm trying to downsize this big 2-story house to get into a smaller living area and get rid of things that mean a lot to me, but in turn realize that I have to get rid of things.
Chris, let's talk a little bit about what Char sort of walked up to, which is that how do caregivers know at what point does the person need more than what I can give? And that real difficult decision of, maybe I cannot maintain my person in our home or in their home.
Right. Well, one thing we notice is that caregivers are at risk for depression and isolation, and we see sometimes the caregiver's health declines along with the care receiver. If there isn't enough help we can get at home to cover the needs, then we start looking at the need to move to assisted living or to a nursing home. I think when the caregiver is unable to sleep, when they're unable to get enough breaks, and their own well-being is compromised, then we know it's time to look at some additional options.
Because we're not supposed to compromise ourselves to that point, right?
Right.
Not to that point. And that's such a difficult topic for some people, that are difficult decision point, with potentially guilt playing a role in that.
But I think both Chris and I talk with people a lot about trying to understand that if you don't make some changes and start asking for help, or finding some other ways to do the things that you're doing, if you don't downsize, for example, or find somebody else to do some of the handy person work around the house, that this will eventually cause you to not be available any longer for your husband, because you're going to be ill, or you're going to be in the hospital, or you're going to be so tired that you can't get out of bed anymore.
Or the breaking point comes quicker then.
Right.
Now, I hear, Shar, that you went skydiving?
Yes, I have this bucket list. And this summer, in July, I did do a tandem skydive, and it was great. I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was.
So that was this summer, and we're running out of time, and that was last summer. What's the next thing on your bucket list?
I would like to go on a hot air balloon ride. When they were in town, I was disappointed that they were tethered. So I thought, well, I've heard that there's one down in the city, so that's my next goal.
That's your next goal. We're going to wrap up on that note then. And what a wonderful note to wrap up on. Shar, I think, figured out how to ask for help because now she's skydiving, and that's a great lesson. Pablo Casals, the world-renowned cellist, said that our capacity to care is one of the things in life that gives life its greatest meaning and significance. And if we lose that capacity to care by not taking care of ourselves, then we lose that great significance and meaning for life. We don't want to do that. You heard what all of our guests said, which is to ask for help when you need the help and figure out when you need the help. Thanks so much for coming here tonight, and don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find a schedule of our topics and resource links, and read my blog, the place where I'll answer more of your questions. Now, we're not going to be here for the next 2 weeks. Next week, we're having Thanksgiving with our families, and you should be doing that too. And the week after that, all my WDSE friends will be here, but not with me. They're going to be asking you to pony up and do your part to support public television. But be sure to join us then on December 12th when we'll be talking about bipolar disorder. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching, and good night.